Test on one day. India, England, Australia. What a play!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of our Water Player Concussion Sub series. I am Sanjay Dubey, and today's concussion sub is Santosh Radhakrishnan, who's an avid cricket fan, plays at a decent level in corporate tournaments. Hi, Santosh. And our guest is very special. We are delighted to have Chandresh Narayanan, who is an ex-cricket writer with Times of India, Indian Express, ex-media officer at ICC. He's been part of Neo Cricket, Nimbus Sport. He's been content head for IPL and Champions League website. He's written a book on Sanat Jayasuriya. He's a cricket commentator, and he's also got his YouTube channel, Cricket Chronicles with Chandresh. Chandresh, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me. Hope you guys are doing well.
Thanks a lot, Chandresh. So to start with, we just wanted to know about your early years of developing interest in cricket and how you ended up being a cricket writer.
I think early years, like it always happens in India, you end up getting into cricket because of your father. And it was my father who sort of got me interested in the sport, and then obviously playing your buildings and so on and so forth. I was a very average cricketer, less than average cricketer who never progressed. I did one season of training at Indian Gymkhana, which more than proved to me that my job is much better off the field rather than on the field. I can never match the skills of the guys who train, and hats off to Santosh for still playing in corporate tournaments. So I think that that's when I realized that I need to move on. I was always interested in media, and the I used to read a lot because in those days, in late 80s, early 90s, Sports Star was pretty big. So reading up a lot of stuff on Sports Star and Times of India. And as I grew along, I read more and more newspapers. It became some sort of an interest for me to try and read. I realized that the more you read, the more you become aware. And then obviously towards the end of my college, internet really took off. Say it's about 98, 99. Internet started slowly coming. We used to have the dial-up connection. So dialing up and getting connected and trying to find out information. So it feels like I may not have traversed a full journey as yet, but it feels like it's been quite a journey in the sense that start off with print, magazine, and internet comes in, and then sort of develop interest and start working from there on.
Yeah, I mean, those dark days of dial-up connection, and we completely different, people sitting in different locations, doing something like this now. So fabulous.
Yeah, Chandresh, so just wanted to pick your brain because I always wanted to ask this question to a sports journalist or someone who analyzes cricket so much. Resiliency is such a beautiful theme, and it is so appropriate in today's time. And who would better know this word better than a sports person or someone who has been into this field for his entire career? So wanted to know your opinion that is attitude or ability, which one is more important in a longer run, be it sports or any career?
I think attitude makes all the difference. You may have tons of ability, but if you don't have attitude to back your ability, then it is no good. I know of a number of talented writers. They say geniuses are flawed. They're never able to marry their genius with their ability, with their attitude. So then that becomes a problem. Similarly, if you see on the field, a lot of times you must have heard about players being very talented, very gifted, but they're not able to translate that with performances on the field. Then it's no good. You've seen someone like a Ravi Shastri, for example, and Kapil Dev has gone on record to say that he had zero ability, and that's a fact. And Ravi Shastri will be the first one to admit that his ability on the field was pretty ordinary, but his sheer consistency ensured that he played almost all cricket in the 1980s. Like I was just doing some math the other day that from the time he made his debut till the time he played his last test match for India, India must have played some 89, 90 test matches, and he played 80 of them. So that tells you the guy was persistent, and he was mocked by the fans, mocked by the crowd, to walk out while batting and people shouting Shastri, hi, hi. From that to just take off and become one of the most important cricketers in Indian history. He's not a great, but he's one of the most important cricketers in Indian history, and that makes a huge difference. People with more talent have played lesser cricket than him. People like Sandeep Patil, people like Sivaramakrishnan, Sadanand Vishwanath, Maninder Singh, Vinod Kamli. These guys were people with more talent, but they played lesser cricket. Just because his mind was strong, he was able to play more. Another example that I can give is Rahul Dravid. Rahul Dravid was not as gifted as Sachin Tendulkar or Saurabh or BVS or even Sehwag, but his sheer ability to control his mind, I think that made a huge difference.
That's a great point, actually. And when that attitude, marries ability, you get someone like a genius, like a Virat Kohli, Sachin Tendulkar. People may say that they are talented. The hard work, the talent sort of overshadows their hard work. Just put in so much work that goes unnoticed, and people just assume that it's just because of their talent they are so good.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you don't put in the hard work, or if you don't put in the hard yards, you're going to go nowhere. The fact that Virat Kohli decided one day that, I can't carry on with this chubby face of mine or a flab around my stomach, he changed his life. And he put in the hard yards. Today, whatever, if he's taking an extra run, it's because of the effort that he has put in. So he has to work hard to reach a point, and from there on, it yields results for him. And same goes with Sachin. To carry on for 24 years, it was tremendous.
So moving on to Indian cricket and IPL, it's had such a big impact over the past 12, 13 years. How has the dynamics changed? Because you've seen cricket 80s, 90s, in the last 3-4 decades. How has it changed the dynamics of Indian cricket? People are more inclined to look out for IPL contracts or Indian contracts, or how does the cricket changed it's seen over the last few years?
I think in the 80s and 90s, Indian cricket was divided on zonal basis, and despite the fact that, say, towards the late 90s, they did away with the zonal system and continued to play cricket on an elite plate basis, there was still some amount of affiliation or affinity towards players from your own state or from your own zone. I think over the last 10 years, that's gone. Now it's more about players who can play well for a franchise. So much so that an Azharuddin had to tweet yesterday as president of Hyderabad Cricket Association that he was shocked that no player from Hyderabad was in the Sunrisers Hyderabad team. Well, I've got some news for him. IPL is business. And if a player doesn't fit in the dynamics of a business setup, he won't get it. I, for a very long time, have held the view that, for example, players from lesser countries or players from associate countries have to find a way of being part of an IPL franchise. If BCCI wants to take leadership of the world game, it's not very able to take it just in the boardroom. You need to take it in other ways as well. But then people have turned around and said that, we're not running a charity, that we can just have somebody on board just to give some experience. But I think that over the years, what has happened is that the attitude of the players have changed. The players have become more aware, they've become more professional, they're rubbing shoulders with the best in the world. Fitness attitude has changed. They are no longer the reticent bunch that used to travel, say, in the in the 50s, 60s, or even in the early 70s, mid to late 90s. I think our cricketers are much more confident. I have this theory that, earlier it was about going abroad and gaining respect. Now it's about people coming here in India and gaining respect of others. So I think that's where the big changes happened in my view.
I agree. In fact, we were having some discussions around IPL on our channel, whether the IPL franchises should be, asked to have at least one player from associate nations. If we are sort of, taking ownership of the, putting the game forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I guess ever since the 2007 World Cup, it has been a revolution for Indian cricket. Like the thought process of chasing 300, 400 like a cakewalk now. They are not, because of that T20 or the short format, the mindset of each player has changed a lot. Coming to the next question, with all these facilities coming up for men's cricket, and also we have come a long way in terms of the women's cricket as well. So what do you see the future of the Indian women's cricket, do you see that get some more formats for the women's cricket, like IPL in place or more number of test matches playing in India?
I was one of the few who saw women's cricket in its previous avatar when it was managed by Indian Women's Cricket Association. And it was only because there was a merger at the global level that there was a merger in India. And there was a mandate from the ICC to push for the merger at all national levels. And I have seen them struggle under IWCA, and for a very long time under the BCCI as well. I've seen the women's cricket struggle. Even when I was at the ICC, that we used to discuss offline, and we used to always wonder, it's just about BCCI buying into women's cricket, and then women's cricket will take off. But there was always a sort of a patriarchal attitude, we're not really interested in women's cricket, nobody plays women's cricket, and so on and so forth. And the merger also actually happened because of Mr. Sharad Pawar. So I think that till about 2014-15, till about 10 years after the merger, Indian women's cricket was probably just sinking, actually. I'm being very honest. Would have expected that, with the money that the BCCI has, they would have thrown money and they would have invested and tried to get more women's cricket started and so on and so forth. That didn't happen. You saw that there were times when, the top 4 teams before the merger were India, Australia, New Zealand, and England. After the merger, India sort of started dipping and West Indies came up. And the West Indies started taking that 4th spot. These 4 teams usually make it to the semi-finals of any women's event. There used to be frustration at the fact that the Indian women's team is not able to take it forward. There was this World Cup in 2013 where India was dumped in the first round itself. I think it was by Sri Lanka. There was a realization, that we have given them everything, but nothing is moving forward. Attitudes didn't help. The state association's attitude didn't help. But I think what happened was after the Lodha reforms were kicked in, Diana Adilji got part of the COA. And because of that, women's cricket got a major fillip. They got contracts. We were one of the last ones to give contracts to our women players. You could see a lot more security, and you saw an improvement in performances. I think the 2017 World Cup final, 50-over final, was a big step up from what they did in 2013. And then last year's T20 World Cup was also a very good performance by them. India is still some years away from being actual world beaters in women's cricket, because I think Australia and England are too good in this women's cricket, because they've invested a lot in women's cricket, and you can see that in the way they send out media releases. It's the England men's test team, it's the England women's ODI and T20 team. You don't find that in India and Pakistan. When Pakistan also does that because now they've got a proper setup. But I'm saying that in terms of India, I always believe that if we invest enough, if we change the way we manage the game in India, we'll be unbeatable in any format across genders.
More number of domestic cricket like we have for the men's team, like the more the number of domestic cricket we have, the better it would be for all the girls to groom themselves and come into the international stage. Yeah.
That's Santosh. That's a very noble thought, but unfortunately, for that you still need to shake up a few more minds. I think that the fact that now there is an Apex Council in every state with a player representative, including a female player representative, means that attitudes will take time to change. Ultimately in India, I always believe things change, but they change slowly.
Yeah, that's that T20 final, at MCG, 70,000-80,000 crowd. That's just unreal. I mean, that can be the ideal stepping stone for us to sort of be world beaters. And, as you mentioned, ECB, Australian Cricket Board, they are the ones who are leading the way for women's cricket. So all we can hope is that there'll be enough attention paid and we can get there. We've still got a long way. Switching gears, Chandresh, tell us, and I'm sure this question gets asked to you a lot. Tell us, Sanat Jayasuriya, the biography come about. What was your experience? How did you manage to do that?
So this is interesting that many years ago when I was at the ICC, I was in talks with the publisher Rupa to do a book on a great cricketer. I don't want to name that person, but let's just say that the great cricketer had a very checkered past. And I checked with we had some very engaging discussions, and discussions moved forward. But then ultimately the cricketer said, let's just drop this because I don't see myself giving out my entire life because then I'll have to speak the truth. So you can very well imagine what he was hiding in his closet. Uh, so, uh, so then the conversation dropped. Then few years later, about 5 6 years later, I got a call from the same publisher with the new guy in charge. He said, "Listen, I was just going through the files, and I believe that you were discussing something. Can we talk about some possible book with the same guy?" I said, "No, I don't think he'll do it." He said, "Then give me some other names that can do it." I said, "I don't think autobiography is possible. Maybe a biography is possible." So I gave him a few names, and one of them was Sanat Jayasuriya. He was interested, he was excited, and he said, "Let's do it." And when I got down to doing it, it was uh, it was an interesting experience because I found that Sanat was not that popular character in Sri Lankan cricket. Anybody and somebody and who involved in Sri Lankan cricket who had been with him for more than 5 years refused to speak to me about him. I depended a lot on second-hand source for the Sri Lankan players. I used to call people and they used to talk to me for 30 minutes explaining why they can't talk about him. So that was a very interesting experience, and in some cases, people had forgotten instances and events, and they used to give me adjectives that he was a great batsman, great cricketer. I said, I don't need to call you to know that. I'm writing a book because he's a great cricketer. You let me know what is it about what happened at exact time, exact moment, and it was difficult. I've realized that very few cricketers or cricket people in the cricket ecosystem remember the actual story of what happened. I think off the top of my head, from an Indian perspective, I can only think about Sunil Gavaskar having a elephant's memory and remembering everything. If you ask anybody else, the 83 World Cup has 1,000 different stories of the same event. The 92 World Cup from Pakistan has got 2,000 different stories of the same event. So much so that same person will give you 50 different versions of the same situation. So it becomes very difficult for you as a biographer or as somebody who's trying to chronicle history of the game, unless you've been there yourself, to try and decipher what is reality, what is fiction. And most of the time, I've realized over a period of time, stories about 83 and 92 sound very colorful, but some of them may not actually be the truth.
Why spoil a good story, Chandresh? That's what I think. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Did you also get to know Sri Lankan cricket in close quarters? The reason I ask this is, over the years we saw, like, if I take IPL as benchmark, 9, 10 players featuring in IPL, but now there's no one, literally no one in the IPL setup. That decline, has it got something to do with the board setup or any insights you have in Sri Lankan cricket?
I think what has happened is that Sri Lanka has not been helped by the fact that they have a government, and it's not today's scenario. It's been the case since the time cricket started in Sri Lanka, and the same goes with Pakistan. They have an institutionalized. In Pakistan and Sri Lanka, it is different. In Pakistan, earlier it was the president who was the patron in chief. Now it's the prime minister who is the patron in chief. In Sri Lanka, every decision is cleared by the Ministry of Sports, trying to change the way their domestic cricket is run and so on and so forth, and didn't plan for the next generation. In the 80s, they had a good bunch because the 70s generation, Dilip Mendes, Anurag Tennikun, and Bandula Varnapura and the likes, they were heroes for the guys from the 80s. So the guys from the 80s like Arjuna, Arvinda, Mahanama, Asanka Gurusina, they inspired the guys from the 90s. So you got a good bunch in the 90s. And the 90s then inspired the guys in the 2000s. But what happened over a period of time, the system sort of deteriorated. Their biggest strength is their school cricket. That is not at the strongest right now in Sri Lanka. and they have too many teams in their domestic cricket. For a country which is very small, their domestic cricket is very, very big in the sense that they've got too many teams. I think that does not help the quality. The formula that Pakistan has is unfit for Pakistan in the sense that they have 6 provincial teams and those are forced provincial teams. Unlike 6 over there, there should have been 6 in Sri Lanka, and that would have ensured that more talent comes up. Plus, what it has happened is that over the last 10 years, they have not been consistent with the way they have managed their coaches. So nobody wants to go there. Everybody is wary of going there. So that has not helped matters. Captaincy has changed and many times. So all these factors have resulted in the players not being at their optimum best. There are lots of lacuna in the system, which is now coming to shape and coming to fore. And you can see that the supply from supply from Sri Lanka has dried up, especially for the IPL.
Yeah, it's a shame because we really loved, watching the greats of Sri Lankan cricket over the years, and for cricket, you need a strong Sri Lankan team, a strong Pakistan, strong West Indies. It just makes the game so much better.
Any funny moments that were shared by them to you, like especially during the 1996 World Cup triumph within the dressing room? Anything that our viewers love to hear about?
I think interesting that 96 World Cup, they were flying to Faisalabad to play a quarterfinal match against England. So Sanat is on the flight and is reading a in-flight magazine. He looks at it and there's an advertisement for a watch. And I think it was Rado, I don't know what it was. So it was a very costly high-end watch. I keep forgetting, he was a very senior former Sri Lankan cricketer who was also a selector or in some position. He keeps looking at it and he's just sitting next to Sanat and he says, "Oh, you like the watch?" He said, "Yeah, I like the watch. I want to buy it." So he said that if you don't score, if you play more than 15 overs, I will ensure that I will get you that watch. So, and you know what happened? Sanat went berserk in that quarterfinal against England. I think he got out in the 11th or 12th over. And he came back and he asked that senior, "What about the watch? I won you the game." But he said, "You forgot the bet. I told you 15 overs and you got out in the 12th over." But he said, "But I had settled the match before I got out. So I deserve the watch." And finally, he got the watch. That's something that really stood out in my mind. Apart from that, like I said, over a passage of time, there are some stories that colorful, but may not be actually true. And this particular story, I had actually verified it 2-3 times. It was true. That's why I'm telling you this story.
No doubt why he's termed as the architect of the 1996 World Cup triumph. Such a great personality.
Absolutely. And it's the 25th anniversary.
That's nice. So, Chandri, slightly changing the track. So, the number of people moving abroad to pursue their higher education, especially in sports management, many of them are moving to Australia and New Zealand. So, what is your opinion of sports management as a career in India? Because with the technology and the sports, especially cricket, badminton, getting a lot of coverage in India. So, what is the future of sports management as a career in India?
See, this is a very touchy topic for me because of the fact that I worked at the ICC as well. And I understand that, the days of considering sports as a pastime in India is gone. I have always long believed that, in India, we consider making money from sports a crime. And that's why you see, I'll give you a classic example. When Tendulkar, Ganguly and Lakshman were part of a panel to select India's coach, they actually wrote a letter to the BCCI that, can you remunerate us for the time that we have given to select the coach? That letter was leaked. So the three actually went out and came out through the BCCI to say, no, they never asked for money. Because they are worried that, their fans will think, Achha, so they are trying to make money out of this. And that is because that's a legacy of the past. Even now, every 4 years, we love the story at Olympics or Asian Games or Commonwealth Games. When we hear stories that, that winner was actually, her father was a rickshaw puller or used to sell bananas on the street or is a laundry man and goes out to everybody's house. We love those kind of stories. In our country, making money from sport is considered to be a crime. We don't understand the concept of a professional sports person. We think that a professional sports person should not be, everybody should play only for the flag. That is one aspect. The other aspect is the way the sport is managed in India. Unfortunately, in India, and this is a legacy of pre independence and post independence, pre independence, sports was managed on the basis of somebody who's a zamindar or a Rai Bahadur or a prince or just about starting out as a businessman, then controlling. And so then we created this feudal setup. Imagine if we have a professional setup in all sports, we will stop wondering why we are not a sporting superpower. And that can only happen if you have the best minds managing sport. We have the best management colleges, we have the best minds. We create amazing managers from IIMA and all the other IIMs and IITs and so on and so forth. They are going abroad. Shouldn't they be in India? Shouldn't they be given a charge? You be the CEO, you be the CFO, you be the CMO, you be the CTO. You create plan. And imagine if Team India off the field gets as efficient as the Team India on the field. Imagine the kind of, we'll stop being pessimistic each time India takes a flight to play in England or Australia. Believe you me, we have that much potential. But planning has still not reached. Imagine if we sort of professionalize the setup from top to bottom. We won't have to worry about anything. We'll be unbeatable. Australia has won the World Cup 5 times. We will keep winning it every time and no one else will be able to compete with us. Why is it that everyone wants to play in the IPL? Because of the sheer money power, because of the way it is managed by the franchises. We are actually underachievers in cricket. And we should not be happy with 2 series wins in Australia. We should be winning more often, and we should be more ruthless in the way we play in all sports, across all age groups, across all genders.
I agree. I mean, professionalism in especially other sports apart from cricket would go a long way. The little success we've had in Olympics or any other sports is sheer drive of the individuals, and it's despite the existing system. The system not necessarily has helped anyone, probably.
Why is that only the Delhi Commonwealth Games came into focus and none of the other Commonwealth Games has ever come into focus? You have never known about any other Commonwealth Games. It happens and it's done and dusted. We don't even know about it. It's a footnote in history. That's because of the way we manage our sport.
Okay. Yep.
I think there was one in Birmingham or Manchester or in 2014. After
Glasgow, I think, is it?
Glasgow, yeah, Glasgow. So they had a proper public-private partnership. They formed a company and they hired people. Delhi also did that, but it is in the form of agencies.
Chandra's changing topics slightly. T20 leagues around the world. We see the 100 coming up. There are T10 leagues, tweaks being made to Big Bash League. What is it, going towards? Is it having a negative impact probably, or what is the future of these leagues? Surely not everything can be sustained, and only a few will end up, being a profitable.
See, there are other forces at play at times. And these leagues are not sustainable at all. Except the IPL, none of the other leagues are sustainable. The PSL has just started. They find it difficult to sell rights. So all these sort of things, and in some cases like Big Bash, the teams, or even the 100, the teams are going to be owned by the board themselves. That's also not ideal. So I think that these leagues are not sustainable at all, except the IPL. And I think these kind of leagues coming up everywhere, in various shapes and sizes, T10, 100, whatever. I think it's also reflection of the way cricket used to be in the 90s and 80s, when there used to be random one-day tournaments in random places, which you never heard about later, Morocco, Singapore, Malaysia, so on and so forth. And it just disappeared after that. So it's just, cricket is moving in a cycle. Earlier it used to be random one-day tournaments, now it is these T20 leagues, which are simply not sustainable. And for everything except the PSL and the Big Bash and 100, you're depending on an Indian to invest as an owner and as a sponsor. It's not an ideal scenario at all.
Right. Excellent, Chandresh. This has been fabulous. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you on our show. Hopefully, you've enjoyed it as well.
I enjoyed it completely. I hope you guys found it fruitful to discuss the sport because it's
Absolutely.
a sport that we all of us love.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Santosh, for joining us. And for our
Thanks, sir.
viewers, do check out our channel for more videos. And if you happen to like them, do give it a thumbs up. And please do subscribe to our channel and also Chandresh's channel. That's Cricket Chronicles with Chandresh. And we look forward to having you back on another time, another show. Till then, take care and thanks for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.